So, hello everybody and welcome to this session on food and nutrition. My name is Martina Sartori. I am a researcher at the Joint Research Center of the European Commission, and Maksym Chepeliev is from the Center of Global Trade Analysis. He's hosting and recording today's session and will help ensure we keep out to our allotted time. Before getting to the presentations, I want to remind you the session protocol, which is, so all attendees except the person currently speaking must remain muted. Then, unless otherwise noted, presentations will last 20 minutes. So this is the case. The session host will verbally prompt the presenter when there are 2 minutes remaining in their allotted time. And when the allotted presentation time has elapsed, if the presentation has not already ended, the host will prompt again, and I will immediately move us on to the discussion period. The discussion period will last 10 minutes and immediately follow each presentation. Any questions, comments you may have, better to be entered into the chat. However, participants can raise their virtual hand as well. I will monitor the chat and participation list for raised hands during the discussion period, read the chat entries, allow for the presenter to respond verbally, and then call upon the person with the raised virtual hand to orally pose their question, comment to the presenter. This will continue until the host prompts there are 2 minutes remaining in the discussion time, and then at that point, the chair, myself, should begin wrapping up for the discussion. There will be then a transition period of 2 minutes. And during this transition time, I will introduce the next presenter. So let's start our session. The first presenter is Hao Cai, which is a PhD student from the University of Zhejiang. He's presenting on taking into account affordable and healthy diets, implications for sustainable development. So Hao, the floor is yours, please.
Okay, let me share my screen first. The Zoom said that I can't share my screen if the host allow me to do it.
Okay, let me see. What about now?
Okay, it's fine now.
Good.
You can see my screen, right?
Yeah, we do.
Yes, go on.
Okay. Hello, everyone. My name is Hao Cai, and I am now a PhD student in China Academy for Rural Development, College University, China. And today I'm going to introduce the research about Chinese healthy, affordable, and natural positive diets to you. This research is led by my supervisor, Dr. Wang Xiaoxi, and we cooperate with Potsdam Institute for Climate Impact Research, Germany. The title of this research is Taking into Account Affordable and Healthy Diets, Implications for Sustainable Development. And firstly, let me introduce the research background. According to report from Chinese Nutrition Society, the prevalence of overweight, obesity, hypertension, and diabetes has dramatically increased in China over the past decades, and more than 1/3 of Chinese people are overweight now, which are closely related to unhealthy food consumption patterns. Meanwhile, Chinese diets are not budget-friendly for poor people, as presented in Figure 4. Food expenditure each day estimated by our MACPI model based on shared socio-economic pathways and food consumption patterns for China is higher than the extreme poverty line defined by the UN And when we use the national poverty line defined by Chinese government in 2020, more than 50% of Chinese poor people's income is spent on food. Furthermore, food production is leading to many environmental issues in China. For instance, the total GHG emissions from Chinese food system grew to more than 2,500 million ton CO2 equivalent in 2018, accounting for more than 18% of overall GHG emissions of China, and this share may continue to increase. So in this research, we explore a dietary transformation in China to improve performance of Chinese diets on health, economic, and environmental perspective simultaneously. So we established an optimization model to study this topic, and we call the model the Healthy, Affordable, Natural Positive Diets, HAND diets model. So the HAND diets model is a multi-object bi-level model with nutrition and energy intake constraints. The submodel of it firstly solve optimal food consumption bundle X with minimum food expenditure and environmental impacts. The environmental impacts we considered are land use, GHG emissions, acidification, eutrophication, and freshwater use. And after solving the submodel, we pass the optimal objective values FK star of each submodel to the master model. The first part of the master model tries to find an ideal solution using FK star as a parameter, and the second part of the master model represents a dietary shift from a representative diet A in China. The parameter beta is the dietary transformation strength, DTS, and the parameter alpha represents the weights assigned to food expenditure and environmental impacts. The nutrition data is from the USDA database, and the food prices are projected by MACPI BAU1. The environmental impacts data is from some literatures. So let me introduce the model agricultural production and its impact on the environment, MACPI. MACPI is a global partial equilibrium model of the land use sector that operates in a recursive dynamic mode and using socioeconomic drivers from shared socioeconomic pathway SSPs, biophysical informations from LPGML model, and endogenous and exogenous food demand. MACPI can dynamically simulate production, consumption, and resources and environmental flows in global food sector. So in this paper, we adopt a regional mapping in which the whole world is divided into 14 regions. For MACPI, and China, of course, is a single region in this map. The MACPI model has a standalone food demand modular that combines nutrition, demographics, income level, and the physical activity levels to calculate the energy requirements of different groups of people. And then it combines them with the dietary structure to calculate the requirements for each type of food. There are more than 60 modulars in MACPI, besides the food modular, including crops, land, livestock, water, etc. Then with MACPI's results, we can study some indicators related to the Sustainable Development Goals proposed by the UN, and for SDG 1, 2, 3, and 12, we have food expenditure, prevalence of overweight, underweight, obesity, food waste, agriculture, price index, etc. With respect to SDG 6, we have nutrition, nitrogen, fertilizer use, agriculture, water use, etc. For SDG 13, we have climate. MACPI can simulate region and grid-based GHG emissions from various sources. And concerning SDG 14, life on land, we have forest share, afforestation, biodiversity, and soil indicators. So after solving the hand diet model, we input the food demand food consumption bundle to MACPI as exogenous intake targets. And we designed a coupling process for hand dyes in the MACPI model due to there are inconsistencies between their environmental parameters. The detailed process is presented in Figure 6. And the target of the iteration process is to minimize the gap between environmental impacts of Chinese dyes in MACPI and in hand dyes model. And adopting two representative dye patterns, which is business as usual run of MACPI and ET Lancet flexitarian dye. We construct three hand dyes scenarios. The basic hand dyes plus, and hand dyes FLX. The hand dyes scenario is a moderate one with 0.2 DTS, and its representative dye is from MACPI BU1. And the hand dyes plus scenario is more radical with 0.5 DTS, and the hand dyes FLX scenario has a different representative dye from flexitarian dye proposed by the ET Lancet Commission. So it is a combination of flexitarian dye and our hand dye. We also adopt SSP2 run as a business usual scenario and ET Lancet FLX scenario for comparison in this research. So let's look at the intake targets from basic hand dyes showing Figure 7. Firstly, as an example, the unit is dry mesa grain. The inner circle is the intake target for the year 2010, and the middle circle is for 2030. The outer circle is for 2050. The top four food categories recommended are still rice, cereals, vegetable and fruits, and pork, which conforms to the typical Chinese food consumption pattern. And detailedly compared with the BU scenario, intakes of ruminant meat, chicken, maize, etc. are suggested to be reduced. Soybean, groundnut, milk, etc. are suggested to be eaten more for protein and energy requirements. Intakes of Chinese favorite food like rice, cereal, pork don't have big chance. And compared to the flexitarian diet proposed by ET Lancet, intakes of oil crops, milk, and vegetables and fruits are less, while rice, cereals, and animal products are suggested to be eaten more. So compared to the BU and the FLX, we think the basic hand dye scenario is more like an intermediate pathway for dietary transformation. And then we run MACPI with different intake targets from our 5 scenarios, and we get 5 food consumption patterns. The stack columns in Figure 8 show the different food consumption bundles in 2010, 2030, and 2050 under our 5 scenarios. And we find that FLX and the hand dyed FLX achieve more radical dietary shifts. In 2050, vegetables and fruits become the most consumed food, and consumption of animal foods like pork and ruminant meat will have bigger drops under these 2 scenarios. And in contrast, the basic hand dyed and hand dyed plus are much more moderate, considering consumption patterns are mainly driven by food intake targets. These results make sense. And meanwhile, we also calculate dietary indices scores of food consumption bundles on the 5 scenarios, which evaluate the dietary quality according to recommended food intakes from some literatures and studies. The blue color means good performance, the red color means bad performance, and poor dietary quality is proved to closely related to more significant health risks. We find that hand dyed FLX and the FLX have best performance overall. BU dyed performance is the worst on most indicators, and compared with BU, our basic hand dyed and hand dyed plus achieve significant improvements on dietary quality. And next, we investigate GHG emissions from effluent sector under 5 direct scenarios. The panel A is CH4, the panel B is N2, and panel C is CO2. All 4 exogenous direct scenarios achieve GHG abatement compared to BAU, and the hand-dyed FLX emits a minimal GHG, followed by FLX. The GHG emissions is closely related to livestock consumption in direct scenarios with less livestock consumption, also on fewer GHG emissions as shown in figure H. And then at last, we shed a light on 6 Sdg indicators. The BAU died with the 6 indicators are food expenditure, agricultural commodity price in panel B, agricultural water use in panel C, fertilizer use in panel D, terrestrial biodiversity index in panel E, and non-agricultural land share in panel F. They are closely related to SDG goals, and the BAU died with the dark green color has the worst performance on 5 of 6 indicators. The hand-dyed plus with dark blue color has the lowest food expenditure in panel A, which means it is more affordable, and the biggest biodiversity index in panel E, and the biggest non-agriculture land share in panel F. The hand-dyed FLX with light green color. It is a combination of hand-dyed and FLX dyed, so its performance is better than FLX dyed on biodiversity, fertilizer use, and non-agricultural land share. Due to our research is not finished yet, so I just draft some simple conclusions here. The current Chinese diet has considerable potential to be improved from health, economic, and environmental perspectives simultaneously. And we believe that a moderate transformation proposal, such as hand-dyed, can serve as an attempt to soften Chinese resistance to radical dietary change. And with the lowest food expenditure, the hand-dyed can also involve more low-income Chinese into the dietary transformation progress. And there are also some limitations of our study due to the complexity of agroeconomic system. Dietary changes may bring about trade-offs between different sectors, which are not studied in our research. And moreover, our assessment of the dietary impacts on SDGs is not sufficiently comprehensive. The performance of some dietary scenarios may be overestimated or underestimated, as only several SDGs are included in our research framework. So this is all my presentation. Thank you for your attention. And welcome to your comments and suggestions.
Yes, thanks a lot, Hao. And yeah, let's go ahead and take some questions from the audience. Please enter your question in the chat or raise your virtual hand to be called upon. Yeah, Maksym, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the presentation. Very interesting. So I have 2 questions. First one, so you were showing the emissions chart. I think it was slide 2 or 3, where there was a composition of emissions like carbon dioxide, methane, nitrogen oxide. Can you go to that chart? I think it was slide 3, I think, or close to the introduction, just where you were showing historical patterns. So yeah, the question I was wondering, I noticed that there was kind of first the share of CO2 emissions was relatively small, and then it increased kind of over time. So I was wondering what's the explanation behind that? Is it like a transportation related emissions or what's happening there? So essentially the CO2 emissions are I think around 1/3 or something like that. If yeah.
So your question is about the emission patterns associated with the fuel consumption scenarios.
Yeah, just a historical trend. I think it was slide 3. If you can go further.
Okay.
Oh yeah, and then, yes, slide 3. Next one. Yeah, here. So we see that the share of CO2 emissions in 1990 is kind of relatively low in agriculture and food system, and then it's substantially growing over time. Yeah. And by 2018, over 1/3. So I was just wondering, what's kind of, why is it? Is it like an expansion of transportation network or, some specific production patterns? Yeah.
Yeah, I think in China, the GHG emission from the agriculture is is closely related to the development of Chinese agriculture, and after 2000, the fertilizer use and so you are seeing the historical pattern of the CO2 and the N2O is growing different, right?
Yeah. So in substantial increasing share of CO2, I was just wondering where is it coming from? Yeah. So is it like combustion emissions related to some processes? So it's essentially doubling. Yeah, I think even more than doubling. So
I didn't from the figure 5. I don't find that there is a big change of the 3 types of pollutants. I think the total GHG emissions from Chinese food system is growing much bigger. It's more about the quick development of Chinese agriculture, but for CO2, N2O and CH4, the shares of them didn't change too much during the historical period. The main type of the emission, the pollutants, is the CH4, and then followed by CO2 and the N2O, right? And the CH4 is mainly from the N2 fermentation linked to livestock production, and N2O is mainly related to the nitrogen use. From this figure, I can't find there is a big difference of their shares.
Okay. So another question, if I may, I was wondering, can you comment something on the dietary transition? We see a lot of studies on the potential benefits and trade-offs of dietary transition. But I was wondering, in the case of China, are there any specific policies or measures that government is planning to implement, how to kind of stimulate this transition? Yeah, because it's pretty hard to change their behavioral patterns. Yeah, so I was wondering if it's something you might have thought about.
Yeah, this is an important topic of our research because now in China, there is no specific scheme for dietary transformation so there is a phenomenon in China because there are many poor peoples and there are many rich peoples, and some rich peoples are aware of the importance of the dietary transformation, but the absolute amount of the poor people is relatively large. So the Chinese government now is Chinese government has not decided to call for a strong intervention on dietary transformation. So in this research, we think maybe we can propose an intermediate pathway, which is not that which will not change the Chinese diet structure, like having a huge reduction in meat consumption and ruminant consumption and rice consumption in China. And this kind of intermediate pathway may be more welcomed by Chinese people. And we also investigate the food affordability. Then this kind of dietary transformation can be involved more poor people into the process, and maybe can persuade the Chinese government to do more actions and adopt our scheme. Yeah, that's our thought based on this research.
Okay, thank you. Yeah.
Other questions from the audience? I have a small question myself, if I may. It is about the result part, probably slides 7 or 8, if you can go ahead. Well, I don't see your...
This one?
Yes, this one. How do you justify this switch back to... no, it's not really a switchback, but in the second and the third scenario, you see that there is a slight increase in consumption of meat. Probably it's chicken and probably chicken in 2050. So how do you justify this very small increase in the consumption of chicken in the diet composition?
Yeah, in our model, we mainly focus on the emission-intensive food and expensive food. So we want to lower the food expenditure and want to get a lower GHG emissions and land use. So chicken is a type of food that is not very expensive in China, and in China, like ruminant meats and milk, eggs, fish are more expensive than chicken, and also chicken. The production of chicken don't have too many GHG emissions and use too many land. So after our model solved, so our model didn't our model don't reduce the chicken consumption, considering it don't have too many environmental and economic costs. So with the time goes by, maybe the consumption of chicken may grow bigger. Yeah.
For these reasons, fine. Thank you, Hao. Any more questions from the audience? Well, if not, oh yes, Maria, Priscilla, go on, please.
Hello, good morning. Thank you very much for this presentation. I think it is very interesting. I am curious about the possibility to have some mechanisms of circular economy from, for example, production of chicken or pork, that you said that is very pollutant emitters of some particular gases, and the possibility to introduce waste of this production in producing energy or another way to reduce the impact, the environmental impact of this kind of production, in order to cover maybe other aspects of the SDGs that you said that it's not full cover all SDGs, but I think it's quite comprehensive in your methodology. It is a possibility to introduce some mechanism of circular economy to reuse waste of some of these productions, or not in your model, to reduce the impact, the environmental impact.
Yeah, now we only focus on the food consumption pattern, and we mainly focus on the shift of the diet. But maybe later we can do some research or incorporate the production practices, like improving production practices, and this may be also adopted as some measures or policies. Yeah. But in this research, we only focus on the consumption side, and we don't take too much production improvement into account. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
We have other 2 minutes for another question, if you want. Okay, so no more questions. Thank you, Hao. Thanks a lot for your presentation. Now let's move to the second speaker of this session, who is Cicero. I hope I have pronounced it correctly, your name. Zanetti De Lima, who is a research economist at the Sao Paulo School of Economics, and will present a research on agricultural R&D investments in Brazil, global responses, and local spillovers. So the floor is yours, Cicero. Please go ahead.
We cannot hear you.
So you can hear me now?
Yeah, now good.
Okay. So, thank you, Martina, for the introduction, and thank you, Maksym, to be the host of this section. So the title of my presentation changed a little bit since we are already submitted this for publication, and this is under review. So the title is a Productivity Growth in Brazil, Agriculture and Global Food Environmental Security. And I have all the other co-authors from Embrapa here in Brazil, and also Iris from GTAP, and also Dr. Hertel, also from GTAP. So the outline for today, I will present motivation, the simple model that we developed for Brazil, and also the improvements that we are doing, the historical validation, results, and some conclusions. So the motivation behind this paper, this research, that COVID-19's impacts on public health and economic trigger several fiscal policy mechanisms around the world. So this is especially true for poorest countries. So this fiscal policy to keep the standard of living, try to keep the standard of living, and to keep the income in different regions of the world, And also this, in the last 2 years, during the pandemic period, increased the pressure on global agriculture and food markets. So because the food, we have a higher share in the budget for poorest families. When you look at this is at global level, this is especially true when you track the dependence in the imports and the dependence on the exports for different countries. So you can see a higher dependence on imports for staple crops in Africa and South America, and in the other regions in South Asia and Southeast Asia. So, if you have these high dependencies, you are more vulnerable to trade disruptions that we had in the last 2 years. And when you look at the prices, so we are living in a higher level of prices, especially for food and also for protein and sugar. And this is especially true in the last 2 years. And for Brazil, this is the same story, but we are experiencing a huge increase in prices. This is the only for the, this is I'm showing here just 2 years of the pandemic. So in 2 years, the prices we had escalated. This is the price index that we have in Brazil. So the price escalated around 15% in 2 years. When we decompose this, is basically for food, more than 20%, housing and transportation and energy. And this is reflecting the available income for we have like this huge middle class C in Brazil. That's a huge middle class. And we can see here the real income, the available real income is decreasing a lot in the past years. And of course, this middle class is buying less and is spending more money, especially in food. And you can see here the class E, D, and C, how they are increasing the spend compared to the higher income classes. So, of course, the international trade in food products, on the other hand, is essential for the economic development and food security. However, during the last 2 years, we noticed a lot of temporary export measures and also import measures that affect international trade for food and other products. So this is a map from March 2021. So, of course, to complete this motivation, Brazil is a major player in the global agriculture trade system. Brazil is in the first or second position for the production and exports for orange juice, coffee, soybean, sugar, beef, poultry, corn, swine. So we have a highest share of this, higher share of this production and exports compared to the world level. When you look only for the crop production in the past 20 years, around 20 years, Brazil is increasing a lot the crop production, higher compared to the global average. And for the cropland expansion, we are also low. We have low cropland expansion compared to the South America, Sub-Saharan Africa, or even Australia and New Zealand in this period. Of course, here I'm only showing cropland expansion. We are not seeing a pasture expansion, of course. And all this development in Brazilian agriculture can have a significant impact on global food security and prices, and also, and this is why we are tracking here. And a strong public investment in R&D, in agricultural R&D, play a key role in Brazil to develop this best available science and technology for tropical and subtropical technology for livestock system and also for crop production. And And if you compare, for example, in this period from 1991 to 2010, if you considering the productivity in the first year of this period, the land expansion would have had to be more than 100 million hectares larger in the absence of this investment and also this technology improvement. So in this paper, we are exploring this relationship and focus on food and environmental security and also for Brazil and worldwide. So, and when we decompose this TFP, this technological growth in Brazil, we can see in this time series from the USDA, the technology improvement is explained 5 to 88% of all output growth in the agriculture in Brazil, and also with the inputs is increasing the share, but also the land is decreasing. And of course, we can discuss later, we have some tricky results for the labor. When you look at the investment, Brazil is spending around 2% of agriculture GDP as a R&D investment in agriculture. However, during the last 2 years, because the fiscal deterioration imposed by COVID, this might significantly and negatively impact public investment in agriculture R&D, and also we are addressing this constraint in our scenarios. So, and to translate this agriculture R&D investment in TFP growth and technological growth, we connected to the simple model, the model of R&D expenses and TFP growth and the TFP and R&D spillovers from key food lists from USDA. And the idea is you have this trend for the agriculture R&D expand, and we translate this in a scenario of capital stock for agriculture and also for the TFP growth. And I'd like to highlight here. So we are freezing, for example, from 2020 to 2030. We are freezing the nominal values of agriculture investment, and of course the real values is going down. But the problem is we have a lag structure in how this investment is translated to technological improvement, and you can see after when we freeze the investments in agriculture R&D. The capital stock is still increasing, but we have the peak, and because the lag behind this capital accumulation, we are going back. We are seeing the effects of these 10 years only in 2040. So, and of course, this because this lag structure, we are going. We are moving away from the baseline scenario. So, and this reflects here in the TFP. So this is how we connected these investments with the technological improvement. And we use this, we use the simple framework. It's an open source global partial equilibrium model for food consumption and agriculture. The focus on crops. And also in this version of the model, we have more than 150 countries aggregated to 17 regions, and we have a crop composition. We have only one crop. It's a result of a crop composition of 135 commodities, cropland, irrigated and rain-fed land use, and also the nutrition model that I will show to you. And also we are doing some improvements in this framework for Brazil. So we already have the simple G Brazil that includes Brazil as at a high resolution level. Includes Brazil in the grid cells of 5 arc minutes is around 60,000 1,000 cropland grid cells. And also we are developing the simple G Brazil B, that's for pasture, considering 2 land uses, and also, and of course, have a better representation for the livestock production. This is super important for Brazil because all these agriculture and environmental policies that we have in Brazil rely on the livestock intensification to achieve their goals. So, this is the modeling structure. So the model, the structure is super simple, as the name says. So we have this crop going to the consumption, and also for the livestock and processed food production. And we are tracking the main drivers of this on demand side. We are tracking population growth, income, and also prices. So, okay. So the important issue here is to process the historical validation of the model. So we look at the global drivers from the period 2000-2017, and we are tracking population change, per capita income, and farm productivity. And at global level, we observe a huge increase in crop output, and also 5% percentage change in cropland expansion in this period. So the idea is that the model should be able to reproduce similar pattern of cropland expansion and also cropland output. And at global level, we are, for this period, we are simulating 58% of change and slightly less cropland expansion. So this means that somehow the model is reproducing more yields per hectare, so giving more cropland crop output. So, and this is the same pattern for when you look at the Brazilian variables. So we are close to, we are projecting, more cropland outputs. So, but we are comfortable with this cropland expansion for the validation period for Brazil. So we are able to track this cropland expansion that is super important for Brazilian agriculture. So, and the scenarios that we are running is 3 simple scenarios that we are considering 3 different rates of investment, and of course 3 different rates of TFP growth, low growth, the baseline, and a higher TFP. And just to highlight here to you guys, for example, this is the observed values from 2016. The TFP growth in Brazil increased. We had a huge increase, around 3% by year. So, and we reproduce this high growth in the third scenario. Okay, and here we have some results. The first set of results that I'd like to show you today is about the malnutrition reduction. And just here on the right part, you can see here, this is the distribution of malnutrition people in Brazil, and the average of per capita in the kilocalorie per capita per day that we have on average, and we have the minimum calorie intake. So the idea here is that we have all these people that are consuming less than the minimum calorie intake. They have some sort of food insecurity. And this is especially, this is super important now in Brazil, because after these 2 years of pandemic, so we returned to 1990 level of hunger and food insecurity. So it's a important drawback. And also this, in the baseline scenario, we are projecting that it's possible to reduce around 80.8 million people from food insecurity in Brazil if you just keep the the agricultural investment. So, and the idea here that we move the calorie intake to the right. So increased, of course, increase the average, but we are here, of course, we are not tracking the change in diet or the change in the distribution. So it's just the average of kilocalorie intake. And also we have some good numbers also for the validation of this model. When you look at the values in 2000 and in 2017. And the good thing, a good feature of the GTAP because the model is running in GTAP code, is that we can track the subtotals. And here on the left, I have two maps that I'd like to show. This is when we track the subtotals in the GTAP code. And the idea here, in this bottom map, we have the Brazilian crop TFP effect on the world malnutrition. This is the idea here is to show the contribution of the TFP growth in Brazil for the reduction in malnutrition in the rest of the world. And we can see here that Brazil has a huge impact for the neighbors in the South America, and especially in Sub-Saharan Africa and South Asia and Southeast Asia is the vulnerable regions in the world. And also in the upper map, you can see here is the opposite effect. When the world is increasing that ability to this investment and increasing the crop output, how this contributes for the reduction in Brazilian malnutrition. And you can see here that we have some strong effect. It's not so strong that Brazil has, but from South Asia. So, and of course, here we are not tracking the trade effects because we don't have this trade effects in the model. And also,
2 minutes, Cicero, even less.
Okay. I'm going. And also, we can track this same idea to factoring the global dependence for the crop output growth, and Brazil emerges. Brazil importance emerge for other developing regions, especially the most vulnerable ones. And also here, I have two minutes. Okay, I can show this. So here is the source of the regional growth for Brazil. So when you look at the Brazilian output growth, we can decompose this in the main drivers. So we have like positive pressure because the world population is increasing. You need to increase your crop output, and also because the income and because the other the biofuels. But when you look at the other regions also is increasing, and for example, the effects of European Union or China or the US alleviates the pressure in the Brazilian output, the crop output growth. So, however, this offset is compensated by the farm productivity in Brazil that's increased, that we are projecting a huge increase in this period. So in the end, we are expecting a 90% change for the mid-century. And also we can decompose this, and yeah, just 10 seconds. So I'd like to highlight this agriculture and investments have been under pressure, and this is super important, especially for developing countries like Brazil, and also for a country that is a large agriculture products and exporter like Brazil. So thank you very much, and I appreciate comments and questions and suggestions. Thank you. Sorry to about the time, Maksym and Martina.
No problem. Thanks for your presentations. So questions are welcome. Yes, Maksym, go ahead.
Yes, thanks, Cicero. Very nice presentation. So I have two questions. So first, I was wondering if you can talk a little bit about challenges for the historical validation of the model that you faced, if there were any, but I assume there were quite a bit of them. So that's my first question. Just interesting, what particular issues did you face and how did you solve them?
Okay, thank you, Maksym. So yeah, the idea behind this historical validation is in practice is a two-step procedure. So we have the observed values in 2017, and we move the model back to 2000, and we have a new database in 2000. And the idea is to get this new database, the elasticity, the cost shares, the parameters, and all these features in the model should be able to reproduce the same observed, or at least close to the same observed values for the main variables in 2017. So the challenge here is especially for this part of the research was to validate the cropland expansion in Brazil. So we play around of this cropland expansion with the elasticity of the supply land elasticity. We play with these values, and also for we change a little bit the cost shares to reproduce this expansion. And also for the nutrition model, we had a lot of challenges too, because the problem is in Brazil now that we have like a U curve for food insecurity. We reduce a lot in the past 20 years, but in 2 years, the shape of the curve changed, like we have inflection. So, and this is difficult to calibrate and to reproduce this trend. So, but with some good literature review and also some playing with these numbers, we reproduce this. We have this good validation results. So yeah. So.
Thank you. My second question is actually related to food security indicators. So on the slide, you are showing kind of distribution of calories consumption and how this is or could be shifting over time. And so what I noticed is that in 2050, there seems to be quite a large share of people or households who are consuming like above 4,000 calories and above 5,000 calories. So I was just wondering what's going on there, considering that, you know, for like, I think flexitarian diet is, I don't know, maybe 2,500 calories, something like that. So it's essentially doubling. Is it, and then related, maybe also in clarifying, is it gross or net food consumption? So in a sense, is there waste, like consumer waste and distribution waste, included or excluded in this count? Maybe that could explain part of this kind of large consumption.
Yeah, you are completely right. So this is based on the FAO data, and also you can see that for 2017 for Brazil, it's a high level of kilocalorie per capita per day. And also, of course, here we are not tracking the change in diets or change in the distribution, how you allocated this in 2050. We are only considering the change in the average. So we are just saying that we have more food available, the income is increasing, so the people are able to increase the kilocalorie intake. And also, of course, you are right. So we are not tracking here the food waste or the calories that we are losing for different parts of the chain, the supply chain. So it's just if I'm not wrong, it's just the calorie intake. Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Maksym.
Priscilla, go ahead.
Thank Thank you, Cicero, for your presentation. It's very interesting. In line with Maksym, I am interested to know if there is any possibility to introduce other indicators of malnutrition, because here we are talking about kilocalories, and that's said about energy consumed by people, but not really what kind of nutrients people intake. So sometimes we talk about food access or food sufficiency in terms of calories, but not really a balanced diet in terms of nutrients. So maybe they eat more calories, but sometimes they are empty in terms of nutrients. So I am just curious to know if there's a possibility to introduce that dimension of malnutrition or nutrition problems, and that's more related to the adequate diet in terms of nutrients. In the case of Brazil.
Yeah, thank you for the questions. Very, very good questions. So it's possible to track. So we are not tracking in this paper, and also there's a student that completed the PhD in Purdue that now he's in Texas. Emiliano tracked this change in diets and overweight and obesity. So tracking these micronutrients and decompose these values as you mentioned. So it's possible to do that. So yeah, this is a good thing about the simple. That's just me sell the model here. This is a good thing that we can play around these values and track these, especially for the nutrition model. So, thank you for the question.
Other questions? Sorry, from the audience. Well, if not, thank you, Cicero, for your very nice and interesting presentation. And let's move to the next presenter, who is Jason Levin-Koopman, a researcher at the Wageningen Economic Research Center. He's going to present a research on the consequences of national food system transitions in Ethiopia for ending hunger and achieving healthy diets. Jason, please, go ahead.
Thank you very much, Martina. Can you all hear me and see my screen?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Move to presentation mode. Yes, so as Martina said, that this is the topic of my talk here. These are still in the preliminary phase of this research, so the focus here is on food security and agriculture, and less on the environmental consequences. But that's something that we're still in the process of working on. This is research that I've been working on together with my two co-authors, also from Wageningen University in Research, Jacques Konijn and Marijke Kauper. Marijke and I are both from Wageningen Economic Research. Jacques Konijn is Wageningen Environmental Research, so it's a slightly different focus. So the focus here is on a diet shift in Ethiopia. Minimize this. Okay. So why? So Ethiopia is currently it's a poor country, and there's a real prevalence of undernourishment now. So it's so there's real room for improvement. This is not just about the calories, though. This is the diet diversity is very low. Most of the calories now comes from staple foods, comes from cereals. and there's very low consumption of fruits and vegetables. So the goal of this this work is to impose a diet shift in Ethiopia, and to see what kind of pressures and stresses this puts on the agricultural system. Currently, most of the foods consumed in Ethiopia are also grown there. So there's relatively little trade. So the shift in diets will mostly again put pressures on the domestic agricultural productive capacity, and be less of a shifting of trade patterns. So as you see here, for these main food groups, only about 7% of total production is imported, and about 2% is exported. So trade, although could be important, and particularly for cereals, it's an important piece. The real drivers are domestic production. So a bit more focused into what we mean by these healthy diets. So here, the basis of these healthier diets are this Lancet paper, Villa et al. Where the average intake for a healthy diet is 2,500 kilocalories per capita per day, and here we explore two diet alternatives. One which is called the healthy diet, and this is on a lower end of 2,300 kilocalories per capita per day. And the idea behind the healthy diet is that everybody eats exactly what they need. So if that happened, there would be no hunger, no undernourishment. Everyone would have exactly what they need. Nobody's overeating, and nobody's wasting food. However, as is also said in the previous presenter, and also the idea behind the 2,500 baseline, is that that's not always the case. That certain people overeat, food is wasted. So that we have a second scenario here called zero hunger. So the idea is that if we impose this healthy diet, then in the reality this would still lead to hunger, because not everybody's eating the exact quantities that they need. So we have a zero hunger diet, which is then higher than this 2,500. So we're looking at these two extremes, where we're saying, okay, so even including these differences in what wealthy people would be consuming versus poor people. Certain people would be consuming too much. This would still be on this 2,800 average would still be enough so that there would be no hunger. So these are the two scenarios that we're looking at as alternatives to the current diet. Okay, so we're looking at these alternative diet scenarios with the magnet model. It's our in-house extension of the GTAP model at Wageningen University and Research. So magnet, anyone familiar with the GTAP, of course, has an intuition of what's happening with magnet, because magnet is essentially GTAP with a whole bunch of bells and whistles. So the first thing about it is that it's set up in a modular structure. So we can add extensions to the standard GTAP in all sorts of different directions, and then we can pick and choose which ones of these extensions we would like to employ to examine a specific the specific research question. So for understanding this model, again, it's based on GTAP, the core GTAP with the latest database. We have added some additional detail into agriculture, specifically splitting the cattle and the pigs sectors. So now you have 4 different livestock sectors. You have separated off poultry. And we have and another important piece is that we've connected the model to the FAO data on calorie consumption in both production and then eventual intake. So we can estimate then how the changes in the consumption in purchasing patterns also affect the calorie consumption. So magnet is also set up to as sort of a recursive dynamic way. So we're projecting out from 2014 to 2030, and this is done on the basis of assumptions on population and GDP growth from SSP2, the second shared socioeconomic pathway. Once we have this baseline, then we impose this diet change, and this diet shift is imposed in then this period between 2019 and 2030. So this is over a 10-year period that we're imposing this diet shift. So we're looking at the consequences then of a change in diet patterns in the year 2030. So this is the actual shift that we are talking about. So on the left hand side of this table, we see that we have the current consumption in 2019, and then what the consumption would be under the healthy diet scenario, and then everything is upscaled for the zero hunger scenario, moving from 2,300 to 2,800 kilocalories per capita per day, but with the same share. So as you see, the consumption of cereals goes down. So this is really up, and it's not just an increase in calories, but it's really a shift in the calories consumed. And then on the right hand side, this is the percentage change shocks that are imposed on the model. Now let's see. I want to jump right back here with some notes myself. Yes. So an important piece of this is that the calories, as reported in the magnet model, are indicators and are not. We can't steer the model on calorie consumption. So these shocks are imposed onto per capita private consumption, and then once we do this, we then look at, okay, did this actually affect the calorie change that we'd like to see? The answer is yes. For most things, and for some things, then we need to adjust the shock to the per capita calorie consumption to then the right calorie mix that we were looking for. So we can't directly steer on the calories; we steer on the private consumption. So what is the consequences of this? Well, first, it's important to see that just this baseline assumes an incredibly large growth in GDP and population for Ethiopia. So GDP triples according to the SSP2 scenario projections from 2014 to 2030. So we even without any of this diet shift or any of this focus, it is assumed that the population gets richer. So you see on the left-hand side of this table, for 2014, 19, and 30, the GDP per capita increases significantly, and also the share of income from agriculture decreases as people move into the cities, as the population gets richer. The healthy diet scenario. So this is then the sort of the minimum consumption, with more of a shift in the types of foods consumed. This has this increases GDP slightly, also because it shifts consumption from imported towards domestic domestic products, just in the nature of the products being demanded. But it doesn't really the increased demand on domestic products isn't significant enough to really put pressure on the agricultural resources. This zero hunger diet scenario has a much larger shift, which ends up reducing GDP per capita in total slightly. So these are not large shifts, of course, but it significantly increases the income share from agriculture. So it's in the opposite direction of the baseline trend. So that's the macro results. This is then what's happening for the supply of this food. So on the left-hand side here we have the healthy diets, and on the right hand is the zero hunger scenario. The blue columns are production, the orange is exports, and the gray is imports. And this is a change. This is a volume change. So this is the results in these two scenarios in 2030 minus the baseline without these diet shifts. So you see that the production of cereals goes way down as the demand for cereals decreases. The production of poultry goes up, and milk goes up significantly. For most of these, the imports still do not increase that much thing, and these are volume changes, not percent changes. So the imports are small to begin with. But again, this is just to show that this is really domestic capacity, and this is then primary agricultural products, but also processed foods. So this is cattle, but also cattle meat, for example, together in one. This is this milk category, but it's milk and dairy. Something we're still a bit wrestling with is from almost all of these categories, we adjust the consumption patterns to fit the desired calorie consumption. However, what we leave alone, what we don't touch, is the category other processed foods. In GTAP, it's OFD, other foods. So this is a processed food category, but of course, it is consumed in significant quantities, and it purchases primary agricultural outputs to create this, and it's also of course imported as well. So this is this category on the far right-hand side, which is sort of a residual, which, yes, so we don't steer on this, but we do check that the final calorie consumption is correct, but we don't steer on this other processed food category. So this slide then shows the food expenditure, and this is the share of total private expenditure. So the category, so each column is then the total food expenditure as a share of total private expenditure. So we have about 54% of all purchases are on food for 2019 in the baseline. This then drops as the country gets richer to about 50%. The healthy diet scenario in 2030 increases that slightly, but not significantly. But then, as we saw before, the zero hunger scenario increases the quantity, but also the prices of the food in this, and the share of total income increases significantly. And of the individual food categories that contribute most to this, this shift is you see the fruits and vegetables category and the milk category. So that was it. That was that's what I wanted to show today. As a conclusion, or sort of as a summary, the healthy diet scenario reallocates existing agricultural resources without large effects on income and food costs in comparison to the baseline. The zero hunger scenario exceeds current productive capacity and pulls additional resources back into agriculture, which increases food prices. So yes, this then of course means that there's a significantly larger share of income needs to be spent on food. So policies to maybe try and mitigate this would be exploring additional trade policies to increase imports of these desired commodities, and also particular attention should be paid to the urban poor when putting something like this into practice, as the rural poor in principle stand to benefit from the increase in agricultural prices and the demand for agricultural resources, including labor. But the urban poor would be left out of this, and would only see then the increase in food prices. Yes, that's the main thing. And then just to throw actually a few things into the group is is particularly this macro effect in this baseline SSP2 that we're using as a baseline to explore this. So this SSP2 scenario. This is quite a few years old already. In the meantime, there's a civil war happening in Ethiopia. In the meantime, there's political unrest in Ukraine, which can affect food prices. So something I kind of want to just throw out there is, does it even make sense to project this out to 2030 and then impose these diets on 2030? Maybe it might be safer just to run this as a comparative static, just to look at the current situation, or maybe simply update this to 2019. Of course, it still assumes a significant increase in GDP. Yeah, so maybe get your thoughts on that. At the same time, this is this diet change. We're assuming it is sort of a cultural shift, not brought about by taxes or anything, but really it's a preference shift, it's a cultural shift, and these things take time. So this is not something that would happen overnight, but something that would conceivably happen in the next 10 years. So that's in addition to these conclusions. Thought I'd throw that out into the group and see if they had any comments on that. And that's that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jason. Very interesting, your point. And let's go to the audience and see whether there are some questions or comments. Yes, Maksym, please go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Jason. Very, very interesting talk. So, and to the point of GDP, so what I was a little bit surprised is that although GDP essentially grows 300%, like the share of food expenditure in the baseline still remains pretty high. So yeah, I think from the previous slide, if I correctly understood, so the share remains pretty slide 11, slide 11 shows expenditure, correct? Is it? Yeah, this one. So this is a share of total budget expenditure on food, correct? You're muted, Jason.
Sorry, I just muted myself as
there
was a loud car driving by. Yes.
So yeah, it was pretty substantial growth in income. Probably the initial income level is pretty low. Yeah, I assume that's why.
Yes. Yeah. This is really $500.
Yeah. And then in this regard. I was thinking in the 0-100 diet, the expenditure on food increases even more. I mean, increases relative to base year. So the share, again, the same slide 11. So I was just wondering to what extent it seemed like realistic in a sense that, people would be spending almost 70% of their income on food, considering they need to cover other expenditures and, So, more like, a relevance point of view, to what extent this is kind of achievable, considering all other needs.
Right. So, that's a great point, and I think this is it's I guess would be the short answer is it's not right. I mean, this is the study as it's set up is to point to what would need sort of these sore points as to what would happen without additional policies if this diet shift happened. So if this if this really were attempted, then yes, then perhaps the wealthy would eat more than their fair share, but then of course the poor just couldn't afford it, and they would go back to cereals.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's just an interesting kind of reality check. Yeah, what model shows. So,
right.
And then getting to the back to the point of GDP, I was just wondering. Yeah, I mean, static implementation might be indeed, kind of relevant to show this point, because I assume we would still be seeing this increasing shares, and structural shifts. But then, did you consider using instead of SSP more kind of up-to-date forecasts like WEO, World Economic Outlook, and do those look kind of more relevant? So combining, let's say, historical GDP trends up to 2019 or 2020, whatever is available, and then combining it with WEO, which goes till 2026. So that's even 2027 now. So that's like a 5-year forecast. And then you're just left with 3 or 4 years where you can assume the growth rates like based on 2026 or 2027 rates. It's just that for this country-specific work, and if we are looking till 2030, we are often even asked, by authorities to use this more kind of hopefully more up-to-date forecast. Yeah.
That is a great point, and yes, that's something I want to explore as we take this research further. So yeah, thanks for that.
Yeah, sure. Thanks. Well, otherwise, yeah, interesting talk. Thank you.
Thank you.
Other questions? Priscilla, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Martina, and thank you, Jason, for your presentation. Also, in line with the previous question to Cicero, in the magnet model you presented at the beginning, there is you mentioned that there is a model of food security and nutrition, and here I didn't see any results in terms of the composition of the nutrients in the diet, and so I am interested to know if it is possible to get some results in terms, for example, how these changes in food expenditure, particularly in the zero hunger scenario, can introduce changes in for example, in macronutrient intakes or in vitamins or in minerals, and only to know, and also to know if they will eat more and also better in terms of qualitative terms. It is possible, or if you have some results to share with us.
Yeah, so those aren't results; those are inputs. So we simply imposed this healthy diet, and Magnet, like GTAP, has a single representative consumer. So we don't have this sort of we don't have any sort of endogenous change about how some people might eat one way or another way. We just impose this is the new consumption pattern, and this particular mix of foods is to ensure that they are getting the right nutrient mix.
Okay, and here I can see only kilocalories.
Right.
But if we look at the changes in the particular food item, for example, the consumption of some meat will reduce, or maybe proteins will reduce, or even, for example, you have, I don't know, the increase in food, some vegetables, and it's interesting to know if it provides more vitamins or which vitamins it could be.
Yeah.
I don't know if it is a possibility to get those results in your model, or only
right. So
kilocalories.
So again, that's sort of behind the calculation of this diet mix. But as to a more general point, yes. So it's not just the calories that are attached to these magnet commodities in general, but also there are a lot of macronutrients, proteins, fats, and carbohydrates. But the magnets also, and I haven't worked this myself, but Marijke Kauper, as my co-author, is connected to this genus database of all these micronutrients as well. So yes, that's one of these sort of additional modules. So that's yes, in principle we can do that. And if we were to do this another way, yeah, by imposing some other shock and seeing how that would affect the diet, then we could report that diet change in terms of the nutrient change, not just in terms of calories, but in terms of all these other macro and micronutrients as well.
Thank you, Shaken.
And another point, maybe just here, is that the methodology for calculating this healthy diet and zero hunger diet shifts, that's from it's going to be a forthcoming paper from my co-author Hao. So the methodology is out there. It's going to be coming out as well. Okay.
Thanks, Jason. Other comments or questions from the audience? Well, I have just one comment. Actually, I was thinking the same about this big share of income spent on food consumption, because actually economic theory teaches you that as your income increases, the share of income spent on food is decreasing. So this is a bit shocking indeed. So would be good to understand why this is happening in the model, which is the main driver, and then acting accordingly. So modifying some assumption related to, I don't know, consumer behavior or other assumption that may affect this specific and strange result. So working on
maybe
that
there's
direction.
Sorry.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Okay, so maybe there's a slight misunderstanding. Is that in the baseline, then as you see, as Ethiopia gets richer, the share, well, it's actually the income share here. Then, so this is 2019 to 2030. So the share of income spent on food does decrease as the country gets richer. So this diet shift is imposed on a country with the same amount of wealth, essentially. So there's no so the difference in the baseline 2030 and these two diet scenarios in 2030 is just a shift in diet. There's no wealth increase or anything.
Okay, so the income is the same.
Sorry?
The total income is the same.
Right, exactly. Right. Exactly. The only difference is the difference in demand patterns.
Fine. So the difference between the third and the fourth bar with the second is to sustain this additional.
It's a change in demand patterns. That's it.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Fine.
Yeah. Yes, but right. I mean, this is again a very important point that this drives this the share of income spent on food to unrealistic levels, which is why sort of the message of this research will be, if we're seeking to achieve this kind of food consumption patterns, then this should be coupled with policies of increasing agricultural productivity or opening up the economy to increase imports to reduce reduce these prices, because otherwise this just isn't going to happen.
Yes, and then if the income remains the same in the scenarios, then one may ask what happened to the rest of the consumption pattern. I mean, if more income is spent on food, it means that less is spent on other items, so other kind of consumption. But is it affordable? I mean, can it be something good for the household in the future? This is another question you may want to give an answer.
Right. Well, that's so that's again the idea that special attention should be paid to the urban poor in something like this, because rural incomes increase as you have a higher demand for agricultural products, but there's less money available to spend on other goods. So and there's and the urban poor wouldn't see any wage increase from this. Most likely see a wage decrease. You see here at the top right hand. So this is the GDP per capita. That it does decrease slightly, not significantly, but slightly from the baseline. So this real strong shift to preference, shift to these agricultural products that does decrease total economic activity.
I think we should move to the next presenter. It was a super interesting discussion, so not surprising why it's taken more time than expected. But
okay, well,
thanks.
Thank you all for your interest.
Fine. So now it's the time of Priscilla. So the last speaker of this interesting session is Maria Priscila Ramos. She's an economist at the University of Buenos Aires and other institutions. She will present research on enhancing labor productivity by improving nutrition in Kenya. So micro econometric estimates for dynamic CG model calibration. Priscilla, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Martina. I will share my presentation. Sorry. No. Oops, sorry. Can you see the presentation?
No.
No, sorry. Let's start again. Okay. Now?
Yes.
yeah, no, good.
Yes, it's okay. Perfect. Okay, so good morning, everyone, and thank you to stay to the end of this session. My name is Priscila Ramos. I am from the University of Buenos Aires. And I will share with you some preliminary results, because this is a work in progress, about the enhancing labor productivity by improving food security and nutrition in the case of Kenya. And I am not alone in this project. I am also with Stefania Custodio, who is the Institute from Health Institute, Carlos III from Madrid, Sofia Jimenez from the University of Zaragoza, and also Martina Sartori here, and Emanuele Ferrari from the Economic Commission from the GRC in Seville. So, this is the outline, quite simple: introduction, theoretical framework and empirical strategy applied to Kenya, and our preliminary results, and finally conclusions at this stage of the research, and which will be our next step in the result. So let me start with the background and motivation of this of this project. You know that Kenya is particularly concerned about the achievement of the SDG 2, about no hunger, and the associated consequences for the society. This is a key objective of the government of Kenya, which is explicitly set out in the Kenya Vision 2030 report. With the team, we have already studied the food security and nutrition in the case of Kenya in previous papers. Here I quoted some of them, but the focus on those papers was how agricultural policy and even how the pandemic and the lockdown measures during the pandemic in Kenya affected food security and nutrition at the household level. In this particular case, we go further, and the idea is to link changes in food security and nutrition at the household level with the improvement of labor productivity. You know, malnutrition in all of its forms, stunting, wasting, and deficiencies in micronutrients, or even overweight or obesity, can compromise the human development and also the economic growth. So reviewing the literature on this particular link between labor productivity and food security and nutrition, we have identified two pathways through which improving dietary nutrients could enhance labor productivity and thus economic growth. So these two pathways are the reinforcements that nutrition will reinforce health condition, and better health condition will allow workers to work better, and also that food security and nutrition could improve learning capacities and thus also improve labor productivity. For instance, the literature also associates that undernutrition is linked to the risks of infectious diseases and in childhood impact of neurocognitive development affected learning capacities. Overweight and obesity are also risk factors of cardiovascular disease, diabetes, and other chronic disease, so also impacted on labor productivity. And in the case of micronutrients deficiencies, such as, for example, iron, can also compromise neurological development and thus also labor productivity. So these are the motivations to our project, and the aim in this particular presentation is to provide some preliminary econometric estimate about the linkage between food security and nutrition indicators and labor productivity. For this particular aim, we develop micronutrients indicators computed at the household level because the energy consumption indicators and the macronutrients indicators were developed in the previous paper I mentioned before, and then run non-parametrics and parametric estimation relating food security and nutrition and labor productivity. Next, or future steps and aims of this project is to provide, from this estimation, provide insight for the dynamic pathway to improve baseline drivers in the CGE framework, in the particular case, in the Demetra CGE model for Kenya, which is a model that managed the GRC in Seville. And of course, we hope that this work could contribute to the literature about two main SDGs, that is no hunger, SDG 2, and the decent work and economic growth. It's the SDG 8. So let's move to theoretical framework and empirical strategy we apply for the case of Kenya. You know, there is a huge literature that mentioned the role of education and health to improve labor productivity. But looking at this literature, there is a few of them that introduce the importance of nutrition and dietary intake to explain labor productivity. On your left, there is a selection of paper that focus particularly in the causality in the short run and even long run causality between nutrition, dietary energy, and labor productivity through improving learning capacities and health statuses. And also from, for example, food consumption that is very linked to quantities, and diet diversity that is linked to the composition of the diet that also impact on labor productivity. There's another work, for example, Odino 2008 in Guatemala that focused his analysis on a particular food items, atoll versus fresco, which introduce different nutrients in childhood, and thus it shows that it has an impact on adult earnings from labor. And even there is, of course, evidences that when we have suffered stunting in the childhood, there is lower income or lower wages in the adult life. So these papers, they focus on food access practically, and food energy, and food quantity in particular, but not focus on the qualitative in terms of macro and micronutrients. So I think we need to move forward and introduce this analysis. On your right, you have another mentioned literature, other papers that introduce the link between labor productivity and the consumption of calories, of kilocalories, and it is positive relationship, and even some micronutrients like iron and vitamin A, which are key also to improve wages. These are papers that focus on Thailand and India, but there is no paper related to Kenya to the best of our knowledge. So based on this empirical literature, we have prepared this scheme that lets us how labor productivity can be improved. We know literature about education. The lack of education is a problem to improve labor productivity, diseases and disability too. And the focus of our research will be to evaluate the impact of the inadequate diet intake and its impact of labor productivity through energy, that means calories, and also in terms of nutrients. And the focus, particular focus of this presentation will be on micronutrients. That means minerals and vitamins. So our empirical strategy will be focused on estimate the impact of traditional variables such as education, diseases and disability in a household, on labor productivity, but also, but particularly on other food security and nutrition indicators, that is daily energy consumption, these calories per day, and the FIES, which is an indicator of food insecurity experience at the household level in the case of Kenya, which is based on 8 questions of yes, no about food consumption, food access, and the experience eventually of hunger during the last month period. And that allowed to evaluate if the food insecurity at the household level is or not really severe. In terms of nutrients, we have prepared a data set for all kinds of nutrients concerning the quantities of food items consumed in a household, and that concern fat, protein, carbohydrate in terms of macronutrients, and in micronutrients, a set of minerals such as iron, zinc, calcium, and vitamins, vitamin C, vitamin A, vitamin B1, B2, B12, for example. all these indicators were calculated at the household level, but in terms of adult male equivalent intakes. So in order to normalize the variables. And in terms of in terms of the equation, we will estimate. We will choose the wages, monthly wages, also per adult male equivalent earned at the household level as a measure of labor productivity. There are other papers that also focus on output because they work on a particular sector, for example, for agriculture, a particular crops. In this case, we are interested to measure labor productivity in all the economy. So we keep the equation of the wage equation. So the estimation will be focused on the semi-log wage equation, like here, where the wages are in terms of adult male equivalent at the household level and transformed with a logarithm. As explanatory variables, we will try different nutrients, food security and nutrition indicators, that is the energy, DEC, and also macro and micronutrients. Before doing the econometric regression, we evaluate collinearity of these explanatory variables, and we have to let aside all macronutrients, that mean fat, protein, and carbohydrates, because they show a high correlation with the calories, and also between them, and also with some of micronutrients. So we decided to focus in this particular case on micronutrients, that is mineral and vitamins. So in the regression, we will keep here all micronutrients and none of the fat, proteins, or carbohydrates. Also, the IES indicator as a food insecurity indicator will be introduced in the equation, and the variables of education, of the 3 levels of education present in a household, that primary, secondary, complete, and university, that could be complete or incomplete, and finally the number of active members in the household that have a problem, a health problem, that means chronic disease or a disability. And of course, this is the disturbance terms with normal behavior. So in terms of data set, we have been working with 2 main data sets. The first one is the Kenya Integrated Household Survey Budgetary, this 2015-16. And from this survey, we took the information about consumption quantities at the household level by food item, and we converted them in grams because it depends on the food item. They come in different units, and we need to convert all in grams in order to match with nutrients. Also total and food expenditure, labor income, and work hours in all the households. And here we will get all labor income at the household level and express it at the adult male equivalent in the household, because we know children should not work. We also get from this survey the age equation of the indicator of food insecurity, in order to build the indicators, and other variables of the household, size, education of active members in the 3 levels of formal education, diseases of the active members, and disabilities. And the second data set is the Kenya food composition table, that is quite new. And this kind of table provide all biochemical contents of by food item, about energy, that means kilocalories per 100 grams, macronutrients, protein, fat, carbohydrates, and micronutrients, that mean calcium, iron, zinc, folate, and all vitamins, also per milligrams per 100 grams in each food item. So we have treated both data set. We have built a monthly wages per adult meat equivalent and transformed to log. We have built the FIS indicators of food insecurity at the household level, the ratios of active members that achieve each formal level of education, the number of active household members that have a disability or a chronic disease. And of course, the sample will be reduced because we do not have this information for all the households that are more than 21,000 households in this survey. So we keep more or less 16,000 households in our final sample. So a particular work in this task was to match food items from the household survey with the information of biochemical contents in order to calculate energy, that is DEC, macro and micronutrient intake at the household level and per adult meat equivalent according to the consumption basket of food by food item and how those food provide nutrients per adult meat equivalent in each of household in Kenya.
You have 2 minutes.
Sorry?
You have 2 minutes left.
2 minutes, sorry.
Yeah.
So we have many micronutrients. Here we focus on particular one because we focus on those where we find deficits in these nutrients. That's the case of calcium. Here we measure percentile of per capita expenditure. So calcium is we present deficit in poor household. Iron is present deficit in all household, in all the distribution. Zinc only for poor household. The red line is the requirement, the minimum requirement evaluated for a young male adult as reference in all of each micronutrients. Vitamin A also we have a deficit in poor household, and here we have vitamin C, B2 and B12 that also show deficit for poor household. So as I told you, we will keep micronutrients to explain labor productivity measured by the logarithm of the wage per adult meat equivalent, and also the food insecurity indicators, education and health. And our results show that first we do some exercises in a bivariate regression, and all micronutrients as well as the DEC show positive and significant associations with the logarithm of the wage per adult meat equivalent. But when we introduce the multivariate regression, or we put all together, coefficient of the DEC turn into negative. And that's talk about the relevance of micronutrients in the diet to explain labor productivity, and also talk about empty calories that contribute to energy, but not really on nutrients at the household level per adult meat equivalent. We have tested this hypothesis, introducing carbohydrate, which is the main source of empty calories, and we found that the negative sign was captured by the carbohydrate, and the DEC, the energy, turned again to a positive one. All micronutrients introduced in the wage equations, as well as education and disability and disease indicators, are significant at 1%, but not the indicators of food insecurity. And also we have some signs, the negative sign, which was not expected for B12 and vitamin C. And we have to test yet the hypothesis, but the problem is that we have, there is some interaction between micronutrients that could not, for example, allow for protein absorption in the case of combining vitamin C and calcium, for instance, and some similar aspect is introduced in B12, which introduce vitamins from animal sources. It is the same case of iron and calcium. So maybe we are doubling the indicators in the equation. That's why the sign of B12, vitamin B12, become negative. So, but we have to demonstrate this hypothesis yet. So, just to finish, this is our regression. All microindicators are positive, except this. I told you that vitamin C and vitamin 12, education 2, as expected, and disability and disease present a negative sign, which is also expected. Most important micronutrient that contribute to labor productivity, in this case, is iron, and then is vitamin B2 in this particular case. So to finish, last slide, I have to say that all micronutrients included in this wage nutrient equation have a positive impact on labor productivity, even if these results are preliminary. Intake of the diet rich in these micronutrients is more important than consumption diet higher in calories. That's talk about kilocalories empty in terms of nutrients. So we have to focus on micronutrients and even on macronutrients. It is important to have a greater diversity of food we eat. So the divers in the diet also talk about the nutrients content of our intakes, in this case of Kenya. To finish, which are the next step in this research? First, we will estimate this wage nutrition equation for the particular case of rural versus urban population in the case of Kenya, and also by agroecological zones, because it is important to know that there is a great discrepancy between problems of stunting, of wasting, and even overweight from arid zones to the capital. So it is important to evaluate these differences also in the case of household in Kenya. And of course, the next step is to calibrate, to introduce the calibration of the dynamic baseline with this estimate in order to add the possibility to improve, to introduce a mechanism that improve labor productivity when we do some agricultural policy that change consumption, that change the quality of the diet in the household, and thus that could or not improve labor productivity, leading to a great economic growth or not. So it is our next step, and we will work on that with Martina and Emanuele, and also with Sofia and Stefania. We will go on evaluating in terms of econometric estimations. Okay, so thank you very much for listening to me, and comments and questions are welcome.
We have 1-2 minutes for maybe a couple of quick questions, just to note.
Anybody from the audience?
Maybe I can ask then a quick question. So, very, very interesting presentation in terms of kind of calibrating what has been actually happening, yeah, and then it also kind of relates to the works that Cicero presented on this kind of more like backcasting and model validation. So I was wondering, do you have any expectation on what challenges you might face when plugging in these estimates and calibrating CGE model to them in a sense, yeah? Or do you think they, seem very relatively smooth and you shouldn't have any issues with replicating them?
To be sincere, we do not start yet on that part of the work. It's our next step with Martina, and the expectation is that to introduce the mechanism won't be a huge impact on labor productivity because estimates are quite small, particularly compared to estimate in education, for example, which are more traditional in a baseline mechanism to improve labor productivity. But the idea is to not only to think on the baseline, but also to evaluate food or agricultural policies that could change consumption patterns, change prices, and then consumption patterns. And when consumption patterns change, also nutrients intake can also modify. The change in nutrients can improve labor productivity or not. That's a risk, because prices can change. We can change our basket of consumption. We can eat better or worse in the future. Of course, there are other policies related to educate people which is a healthy diet, because that's a problem too. There are other aspects related to a healthy environment that also we have to take into account. But here, I think in terms of nutrients, the impact in the baseline will be small, but allow us to introduce this mechanism that changes in prices can produce changes in quantities, and then can change nutrients and have a small or impact on labor productivity. So thinking in the future to a way of indirect way to improve labor productivity, even in the long run, particularly when we change our diets in terms of diversity, in terms of calories, in terms of, particularly in this case, of micronutrients. The idea is to have a full representation, but we will see what we get in terms of final estimates for calories and nutrients.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Priscilla. I have a question myself, although I'm supposed to be co-author of the paper. So, you know that the METRA has differentiates between 3 types of labor: skilled, semi-skilled, and rural. So my question is, would it make sense, or would it be possible to distinguish, to compute 3 different equations based on different wage levels, in order to see whether there might be some differences in terms of nutrients contribution to labor productivity as you move from the lowest labor range to the highest, and see whether there might be some differences in terms of the contribution, let's say, of iron to productivity in rural labor. This is the question.
Yes, I think it is possible. We have to look at the data if we just have enough observation for each of cases, because the social accounting matrix for this part, for labor income or even for household consumption, were based on of the same survey. So data should be available, but we need to see if it is enough in terms of observation to do those estimation by labor skill. Also, we have to keep the same definition of skills that was used in the social accounting matrix. So we have to look at this match to be consistent in terms of our eventually estimates in terms of econometric with was which is in the social accounting matrix defined as skill and skill labors. And also, I mentioned that it is interesting to know the difference between agroecological zones, because in the social accounting matrix of Kenya, we have also this geographical zones. And maybe it could be interesting also to evaluate the possibility to estimate these coefficients for each of these zones, because in terms of in nutritional terms and food access and food sufficiency, and there are many differences depending of arid or rainfalls zones in the case of Kenya. I think we need to work further to explore the possibilities that provide us this survey. I think we have many observations, but when we try to estimate some particular zones or some particular cases, in this case of labor skill, maybe we lose a lot of observation to have a full data, and we need to try it is possible.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
So I think that there's no more time left to other questions, although there is one very small, very little, very quick.
I think we need to wrap up the session. Yeah, we're already running out of time. So.
Yes, okay. So thanks all presenters for the really interesting talks, and let's enjoy the rest of the conference just started. So I think that we can close the session here.